All right, so today we're going to talk about trees because you probably have no clue how absolutely insane trees are. Trees are all around us. We kind of just tend to take them for granted, which is fair. But trees are pushing the limits of existence every day and have been for millions of years. So we're going to start off with what a tree even is. So trees are woody perennials, which means they have woody stems and they keep growing year after year. They don't die and then come back as a new plant the next year like annuals. They're split into two groups, gymnosperms and angiosperms. Gymnosperms are considered the older or more primitive trait, having needles rather than traditional leaves, cones, no flowers, and being evergreen, meaning they don't lose their leaves. Angiosperms are considered the derived or newer trait. They have broad, flat leaves, they flower, bear fruit, and are deciduous, meaning they drop their leaves in the fall. Trees have been around for a long time, almost 400 million years, 390 to be exact. So trees are ancient and as such have been able to push the limits of life as we know it. Trees live in a world of extremes, being both the oldest and largest organisms as far as we know. The tallest tree in the world right now alive is Hyperion, which is a giant sequoia out in Redwood National Park in California, and it is 116 meters tall. That's almost 400 feet if you're American. The largest tree in the world, though, by surface area is General Sherman, another giant sequoia in that same park. And it has over 52,000 square feet of surface area, which is crazy, and it comes in at over 1,400 tons. The oldest tree, though, is a little bit contentious. So we can measure a tree's age based on the number of growth rings it has. So every year, a tree has a growth season. It has springwood and summerwood, which make up one ring. And so if you count those number of rings, that's how many years the tree has been alive. But there's some debate as to which tree is the oldest because of things called clonal root colonies. So you'd think it's just as simple as, oh, count the rings on every old tree and then figure out which one has the most rings. But that's not necessarily the case because of these clonal root systems, which are root systems, obviously, that continuously grow and bring out multiple trunks. So the trunks will die, but the root system is still active and grows new trunks and can grow multiple at a time. And they're just really weird. So I'm going to go with the oldest tree in the world is Methuselah, a bristlecone pine, not a clonal root colony, and it has been alive for almost 5,000 years, which is a stupid long time, the oldest single living thing as far as we know. But it gets even crazier and even older if you consider the root systems. So the oldest aspen colony by the name of Pando is either between 16 and 80,000 years old. It's hard to tell because root systems, varying rings, it gets a little harder to figure it out, but the most accurate estimate is probably 40,000 years old, which is absolutely astronomical. But how do trees exist? They can for a long time, but how do they do it? Well, that answer is more complicated than you would at first think. So plants need water, obviously. Water and sunlight, that's pretty much all plants need. And they need this water especially in their leaves where photosynthesis happens because water is a pivotal part of that. Issue is trees are tall and gravity is really strong, pushing downwards at almost 10 meters per second. So trees have to have some way to overcome this gravity. And the way they do it is because water is sticky. Yeah, I know that sounds insane, but there are two kinds of sticky. There's adhesion, which is what you probably think of. That's when things stick to other things. And there's cohesion, which is when things stick to themselves. Water is cohesive because it's an ionic bond between oxygen and two hydrogen atoms, H2O, But the covalent bond, not ionic, covalent bond, which means they share electrons, and when they share those electrons, the oxygen shares unfairly and so has a negative charge, and which gives the hydrogen a slightly positive charge, which means that the oxygen and other water molecules are attracted to the hydrogen in the first water molecule, which means that they then all stick together. Cohesion is what causes surface tension, which is why things like water striders and basilisk lizards can run and walk on water, and why you die even if you fall on water from a far enough height, because your body doesn't break the surface tension. So water is sticky, and that is the tree's secret to getting water to continuously go up its trunk. Because water wants to diffuse up, it wants to get to the top of the tree because of a process called diffusion. Diffusion, fairly simple principle. Scientific words, it means that particles move along a pressure gradient. In layman's terms, that just means things want to go from where they are to where they aren't. Diffusion. And so water wants to go from where it is at the base of the tree to where it isn't, which is at the top of the tree. And so all the tree has to do is move the first couple water molecules up, start moving them up to fight against gravity, and the rest will follow because of cohesion, because they want to go to the top of the tree, which makes it easy for the tree. So it basically starts a water chain going up where it only has to move the first molecule. It goes up to the top of the tree where it then either transpirates or guttates out the leaves. That's water leaving as vapor or liquid respectively. And the process starts all over again with the next water molecules coming up into the leaves, diffusing out, coming up, all cohesed, is that a word? That shouldn't be a word. But all held together by cohesion as they go up the tree to the top where they can take part in photosynthesis and then be transpirated or guttated out. Side note, trees are also socialists because they have mycelial or fungal networks that allow the trees to essentially share nutrients. So the fungus connects all of the tree's root systems, and then basically trees can send water and nutrients along those roots. So if one tree is in an area with a lot of water, it can absorb all the water and then send the water. It doesn't need out to other trees that can get less water. It's same with other nutrients, which is just insane. These can connect whole forests, and that's why most trees grow in a forest setting. But more on that later, because alive is a bit of a stretch. See, trees are mostly dead being partly alive, but mostly dead, kind of like zombies, the living dead kind of vibes from that. So they have a vascular cambium, which produces the xylem and phloem, which is the lifeblood of a tree. The xylem and phloem is what has the vessel elements, which is what uses that cohesion water train from before to move water up and move sugars down, because the sugars are produced in the leaves need to go down to the rest of the tree. But that's another secret, is that it doesn't actually need to go to the rest of the tree. It only needs to go to the outer layers of the tree, because the inner layers, what we call the heartwood, is dead. It's basically the skeleton of the tree piled on top of itself to produce this trunk to support the tree, with the living vascular tissue on the outside protected by the bark, which is also dead. It's made of cork cells. And so as the meristem, that's the growing bit of the tree, grows out, the inner vasculature dies and is replaced via the vascular cambium with new vascular tissue, which then continues the process of moving nutrients throughout the tree. So something like over 90% of a tree is actually just dead wood supporting the tree from the inside and doesn't actually need nutrients. So these massive trees actually don't need nutrients for the whole tree, which is another of their tricks to staying alive. So because, again, only the cambium and the vasculature are what needs the nutrients. So we're going to talk a little bit about the vascular system. This isn't unique to trees, but is also kind of zombie-like and freaky, so figured it made sense to talk about. So the vessel elements, which I mentioned before, are the tubes in the xylem and phloem. They're what move all the nutrients around the tree. But the thing is, they can't survive by themselves. So in order to be those hollow tubes that can push nutrients up and carry them down, They don't have any room for the organelles that involve the metabolic processes, things like a nucleus, the brain of the cell essentially, to create new genetic information and to keep the cell running smoothly. The mitochondria, everyone knows, powerhouse of the cell, to produce energy for the cell to do stuff. So in order for them to survive, they have a companion cell. The companion cells are attached to the vessel elements via the perforation plate, which also isn't alive, just thought I'd point that out, to send these, send the results of these processes, to send instructions and to send ATP, adenosine triphosphate, through to the cell. ATP is cellular energy, to allow it to then continue doing the work of being a vessel element. So more zombie stuff with the trees. Another extreme is the loneliest tree. So I mentioned before that most trees are socialist, but they all aren't. Some of them rise up against their socialist overlords, others are planted by humans. And so the loneliest tree that grew the farthest away from any other tree was the tree of Tenere, an acacia tree growing in the middle of the Sahara Desert. 250 miles away from any other tree, it marked a landmark of hope for people who had to pass through the Sahara, especially back before there were motorized vehicles and they had to take like camels and stuff across the desert, because it was not only a symbol of being right around the halfway point of anyone going through the Sahara, but it was also a symbol of determination, of something growing there against all odds. Even needing to grow roots that extended 36 meters deep into the ground, which is insane, as we'll talk about in a minute. However, I said was because tragically this tree was hit by a drunk driver in 1973. So don't drink and drive, or you might destroy a living international cultural landmark that's been around for centuries. So yeah. But the record is now held by Sitka, which is spruce growing on Campbell Island, and its name is way lamer than the tree of Tenere, in my humble opinion. But it grows 170 miles away from any tree. So still pretty far, but not nearly as far as the late tree of Tenere. So trees are also shallow. As I mentioned, having deep roots is really unusual. So we have that trees are zombies and they're shallow, kind of like most of the people I went to high school with. But anyways, a common myth is that tree roots mirror their branches, that you can tell how far out a tree's roots go by looking at how high their branches grow, which is just wrong in so many ways. Because first of all, most root systems extend less than a meter into the ground, which is why they do things like ruin sidewalks and make great places to trip when you're wandering around outside. And they can extend 2 or 3 times the width of the branches, which is pretty far. So not a mirror at all, because it's way shallower and way longer than the tree's branches, which can be, you know, hundreds of feet or hundreds of meters in the air, and don't grow out nearly as far. There are a couple reasons that their roots don't go very deep and rather go outwards. The main reason is that most nutrients are near the surface. The deeper you go, the harder it is to dig, and so tree roots tunneling through the harder rocky soil underneath for fewer nutrients than they could get if they just stayed on the surface is really stupid. And so trees developed to grow more out so they can cover more surface area in the nutrient-rich upper layer of the soil. But another reason, which kind of ties back into the zombie thing with trees, is that shallow roots mean that they can survive being knocked over. What I mean is, I've seen examples out walking around in the woods of trees that have been knocked over by a windstorm, but their roots are still, even if only partially, in the ground. And what's happened is some of the limbs have grown up as new trunks and are still growing leaves, and the tree has new growth, kind of like a false hydra tree of sorts, where the trunk now becomes like a massive root, leading to the actual original root system, which is still funneling nutrients along and then up the limbs of the trees, which have now become like new trunks or false hydra heads, to continue with that analogy. which is crazy. So trees can survive being knocked over in this way because they can stay intact. This doesn't happen all the time, but I've seen it quite a bit, so it's not a terribly uncommon occurrence either. And another reason that this wouldn't work with a taproot is because if the taproot, which is wedged in the soil and is less likely to break, doesn't break when a tree would get knocked over, that means the trunk's gonna break, because something's gotta break. If there's enough energy to break the tree or knock it over, something's gonna get knocked over. And if the roots don't give out and pull out of the soil, which it wouldn't if it had a deep taproot, then that means tree's trunk is gonna snap, and then that tree is fully dead, no longer partly dead, and Miracle Max can't figure out why he should revive the tree. So basically, trees are shallow zombies in more ways than one, and survive because water is sticky. And that's what I got on trees.